So, how do you deal with the stress of life in your life? Do you do as well as the bomb diffusing kind of person, or do you let the little things in life cause you to get anxious and uptight? Hello, everybody. It's Chris again coming to you from Willow Springs, North Carolina. And today we are going to be talking about stress, what it is, how it affects our body, and hopefully a healthy habit that you can use to reduce the amount of stress that's in your life. Okay. Hope everybody's doing well today. I see we have Cole in the house, Deerica, Rasha, Andrea, and Sarah, along with Melody. How's everybody doing today? I hope you can hear me well enough, right? My sound is coming through and the picture looks clear. Everything looks good on my end. My YouTube signal seems to be going really strongly this morning. Good morning, Ashley. Good to see you. Hope you're doing well. Hey, how's everybody's stress level? Who is stressed out? Anybody stressed out for any particular reason? And why are you stressed out? Somebody go ahead and let me know. What's going on in your life? Who's stressed out? Holy cow, Ashley Nicole says she's stressed out. What's got you going on? Cole, I'm stressed because of school. You know what? Melody's taken 432 hours of classes this semester. I think she's like taking your entire college career, so I'll bet she's stressed out too, right? Um, Cole, right. Well, how do you deal with stress? When you folks get stressed out, what's your best stress busting exercise? Or do you have one? How many of you don't have a way to deal with your stress? Ashley Nicole's got a toddler. Ugh. I'm not ugh, but wow, that's overwhelming. Planning a wedding, I'll be honest, that is an ugh. I helped do that. It's a lot of work, right? You just found out you have to move and too much going on at once. Wow, you are certainly juggling a bunch of things, Ashley Nicole. Okay, Melody does breathing exercises. Sports psychologists often talk about that to their athletes. When you get super duper nervous and everything seems to speed up, you just need to stop for a minute and breathe. You'd be surprised how many people quit breathing when they really get stressed out. And the lack of oxygen is definitely something that affects your ability to perform. Therapy is teaching me methods, but they aren't very effective for me. Right. Dealing with stress and anxiety is definitely a full time difficult job, Ashley Nicole. Right. And Sarah tries to talk her stress out. That's a great way to do it. Resets the vagus nerve. There we go. Melody with a biological answer there. Okay, so here's the deal. Today we are going to talk about the second part of health and well being. We're going to talk about stress, that huge killer of human beings. You know, it causes our heart uh, to beat too fast. We have heart attacks. It helps add to your cholesterol level. It makes you more susceptible to sickness. There are any number of reasons why stress is a killer. So today we're going to talk about it. What's the physiology of it? What causes the feelings? And maybe some coping strategies that you might use to avoid stress. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, here's the deal. Stress, let's go ahead and define it real quick. It's a non-specific physiological response to any demand placed on it. What is a stressor? A stressor is anything that causes stress. Now, what is a stressor? Well, as Ashley is saying, having a child is a stressor. Having a Planning a wedding is a stressor. Being told that you have to move out of your house is a stressor. Did you know what? A closed door, in a sense, is a stressor in that when you come up to a door, it causes a little physiological response and you have to open the door. So, a stressor is anything that you have to adapt to, and stress is your physiological response that occurs when you are the target of stress, right? Now, your book talks a lot about the different kinds of stressors. Uh, uh, Ashley Nicole is talking a little bit about daily hassles as well as distress and eustress. Actually, Ashley is teaching us everything we need to know. Now, Ashley Nicole, she has a toddler. She's probably stressing out daily about school as well, and I'm sure she has to pay her bills. Those are what we would call daily hassles, everyday irritations that are primarily negatives. How many of you have daily hassles going on right now? I've got the bills. I've got cars always breaking down. I've got to go to the grocery store and get food for Meatloaf tonight because I have to cook and teach webinar. Stress me, stress me, stress me. Those are daily hassles. Now, then we also have major life stressors. Ashley Cole's talking about two daily life stressors. The first one is having to move. Doesn't happen every day, doesn't happen every year, but when it happens, it is stressful and it is negative. That's a major life stressor featuring distress. But you know what? She's also planning for a wedding. Now, you would think, hey, a wedding's a happy thing. Having a new baby, these are happy things. Getting a new job, this is a happy thing. Yes, they are happy, but again, they are still stress. Just like I told you, that closed door is a stressor. Adapting to a great new job with a big raise is a stressor. Moving to a bigger house that you really love is stressful. Having a baby that you absolutely love and planning for that baby is cool, but it's a stressful event, right? And so here's the deal. What I'm going to try to convince you of today is it's not the events themselves that cause you the experience of stress, but it's how you choose to receive, frame, and think about those stressful things. Remember, chapter 3, we suggested that reality is not as objective as we think. And you pick and choose what it is you're going to pay attention to and how you're going to see your world, right? We are going to talk about the way in cognitive psychology, we talked about schemas and beliefs. Did you know that cognition is a habit? You get used to thinking certain ways, and that affects the way you process the world. One of the things we're going to talk about is how you can change your reality, how you can change your habit, and how mediating factors can affect whether or not you suffer the physiological effects of stressors. Yes, Imani, a stressor can be positive, anything you have to adapt to. If you think about it, getting dressed up and going out to a big party, that's positive, but you have to get in the car, you have to get there. When you get there, you meet people, it's exciting. Yes, stress can be positive, things are stressful. Anything that you have to make a calculated, thoughtful response to, in a sense, is a stressor. Great question, Imani. Very, very good question. So, it's not the changes in our life, it's not the children, the jobs, any of these other things. Really, it's the way in which we can frame these events as they run through our mind, right? Now, here's the deal. When your body does respond to physiological stressor, remember our amygdala, we talked about emotions the other day. Whenever something comes into your mind that causes you to have to make an adjustment, your amygdala quickly is going to become activated. And it's going to activate this thing called your autonomic nervous system. Now, you don't really know about your autonomic nervous system day to day. You don't feel it or think about it. But your autonomic nervous system is the nerves that run the inside of your body. They control your stomach, they control your heart, they control your gallbladder, they control your adrenal glands. All of those parts of your body that are not under conscious control are innervated by these nerves coming from your brain, and we call this the autonomic nervous system. Now, here's the deal. Anytime something causes your amygdala to activate, remember that fight or flight response, anytime something quickly causes your amygdala to activate, you are going to experience a sympathetic nervous response. You know, you probably heard of the fight or flight response. This is what we use. This is what not Hans Seeley, but oh, doggone it, I forgot his name, that coined the term fight or flight. But basically, this is when the animal gets scared and it either attacks or it runs away. Did you know that sometimes it's adaptive for animals to freeze, right? When the snake is near the mouse and the mouse sees him there, the mouse will often freeze. Did you know that freezing is an adaptive response? Sometimes some people's sympathetic nervous system causes them to freeze up. Have you ever frozen up in a moment of fear and you just can't move? That's part of this fight or flight response, and it's all caused by your amygdala. When something causes your amygdala, can be is activated, right? Now, your amygdala is going to then shoot a signal down to your hypothalamus. Remember, we suggested that your bodily clock is in your hypothalamus, that suprachiasmatic nucleus. And you know what? Your hypothalamus also controls all other kind of mediated behaviors or motivated behaviors. It controls your eating. It controls your sexual drive. It controls your temperature regulation. But the other thing that the hypothalamus does is it can also release epinephrine and cortisol that activates your autonomic nervous system. Now, cortisol, when it's released into your bloodstream, it increases your blood pressure and your blood sugar, gives you more energy, and it gives you more, it pumps you up so that you can fight or flight. Adrenaline also prepares your muscles for violent action. So, in a sense, this cortisol and this adrenaline causes you to get ready to fight or flight, right? Now, also, along with causing the release of adrenaline from your adrenal glands and the cortisol being released as well, it's also going to cause a set of effects to your organs. When you get afraid and you're ready to fight, you don't need your stomach. So your nerves shut down your stomach and they cause extra attention to be put on your heart and your lungs. This is why sometimes your stomach is upset when you're really stressed because your adrenaline, your autonomic nervous system is shutting your stomach down because it thinks you are facing a threat, right? Now, the net effect of this sympathetic nervous response is to prepare the body for battle. You get increased blood flow to your muscles, increased muscle tension for vigorous activity, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your blood sugars, and your fat production all rise in an attempt to give you the energy to fight. And it also speeds up the blood clotting to protect against blood in case of injury, right? Now, here's the deal. This is the physiological response that occurs when you are frightened. Has anybody ever seen a wild animal up close? Anybody ever almost stepped on a snake? How many of you have been in a car wreck and freaked out about a car wreck? How many of you have ever been on a Ferris wheel or some sort of scary ride and had a sympathetic nervous response? How many of you have ever can remember that, right? Turned a corner and found a bear. That'll do it almost every time, Andrea, right? Yes, it is supposed to help. Here's the deal, Melody. This sympathetic nervous response was designed to work in the short term. It's designed to be when you walk around the corner and run into a bear. It's supposed to occur whenever you are attacked by another animal. An autonomic nervous response was set to work in very short intervals. Beep. All right, I see a bear, I fight it off, and then I go back to normal. I see a bear, I fight it off, I go back to normal, right? Here's the only problem with modern day. Your nervous system was not developed to deal with chronic stressors, right? So when the bear comes, the bear goes away and you relax, but your bills never go away. The toddler never goes away. School never goes away. So you know what happens? Your body is always in an autonomic, is always in a sympathetic nervous response if you're stressed out. Does that make sense, right? I had someone broke into my house when I was giving a bath to my toddler. Okay, so that totally freaked you out for a couple of seconds, Imani, but eventually they left 5, 10 minutes later and you started to calm down. That's a very acute stressor, and ran from the back door. I wouldn't doubt that, right? Then when we adapt to, yeah, probably another 2 or 3 million years, Melody, but by that time we'll all have killed each other and died out, right? So I don't I don't know. The brain hasn't had time to adapt to the written word. That's why we remember things better when they're pictures. That's why we remember faces better because we still have our brain hasn't adapted to really, really, really take advantage of reading. Same thing with stress. Now, here's the deal. This guy named Hans Seeley identified this thing he called the general adaptation syndrome, which can explain why you experience physiological problems because of stress. All right. So here's the deal. He has this little map here. Initially, when you are stressed out, did you know that in the 10 or 15 minutes that you are experiencing the threat? So Amani, 15 or 20 minutes after that person broke into your house. Andrea, for about 10 or 15 minutes after you experienced encountering that bear, did you know that your immune functioning actually dips for just a few minutes? And what it does is it keeps you from having an allergic reaction that might prevent you from fighting in that short term. So your immune system actually dips so that if something scratched you, it wouldn't cause you to immediately swell up and not be able to fight. This is what he called the alarm stage. Your body mobilizes its physical resources for battle, and you have a brief drop in your resistance to threats coming into your body. But then your body quickly prepares for this sustained attack by increasing your immune functioning. And we would call this the resistance stage. And for a while, after something scary happens, your body is actually more resistant to infections and other bad things that could hurt you. Now, here's the deal. If you keep your foot on the gas pedal the whole time, this system is running at overdrive at high speed for a prolonged period of time. What happens, like any other system, it gets tired. If your resistance is forced to work too long because you're too stressed out, after a while your immune functioning will run out of energy. And your immune functioning during the exhaustion stage, your immune functioning will actually dip down to below normal. And when your immune functioning is low, guess what? You are more susceptible to the viruses, to the bacteria, and to the other things that typically don't make you sick. Does that make sense? Okay. Exactly, Melody. So you understand, it's all designed to allow you to fight an animal, to get injured and still be fighting, even though you're injured. And then as soon as the threat goes away, it increases your immune functioning so that whatever injured you doesn't kill you. Isn't that a brilliant system? And that works so well in the short term. But unfortunately, in modern life, the bear never goes away, right? We never get away from the bear. We never get away from the attacker. Each and every day, you are focused with an onset of stressors, which would keep your resistance stages maximized. Now, what are the physiological implications of experiencing chronic stress? Chronic stress leads to exhaustion of the system and decreased white blood cell count. So you're more prone to infections. You're going to have increased heart rate, and vasoconstriction of blood vessels is going to be a good condition to increase your chances for having a heart problem. This chronic high levels of glucose and the fat that are running through your system to prepare you with energy, they clog up your system, so you're more likely to have heart disease and buildups of plaques and calciums in your veins. All of these things are bad for your heart functioning. And also, people tend to use negative coping strategies like smoking, drinking, and eating to deal with their stress. And we folks all know that smoking too much is not good for you, drinking too much is not good for you, eating too much is not good for you. So, in a sense, the experience of chronic stress in the exhaustion stage causes a cascade of physiological responses that make you more prone to sickness. Does stress make you sick? No. What stress does is it reduces your ability to fight the things that make you sick. Does that make sense? Stress doesn't make you sick. It causes you to become it lowers your defenses against things that might cause you to be sick. All right. Now, here's the deal. It turns out that major life stresses, if you look at this chart right underneath me, uh, you can actually. So we have two charts here. The chart over on my left shows you what they did was they brought these kids into a laboratory. These college freshmen into a laboratory, and they has them. They ask these students to report on the level of stress that they were experiencing at school. They then swabbed these kids' nose with a cold virus. Can you imagine giving them a virus? And they looked at who got sick. And it turns out that the kids who reported more stress were more likely to get sick than the kids who reported low levels of stress. They gave them all the same virus, but the low stress kids didn't get sick as much as the kids who had high stress. Below me right here is another way of measuring stress. So that was daily hassles. These are major life changes. Have you had any of these major life changes in the last year? Have you had the death of a close family member or a close friend? I've actually had both of those this year. One of my good drinking buddies had a stroke and died on New Year's Eve, and my grandma, who I told you about in class on Tuesday night, died in November. So I've had both of these very negative, stressful terms. Have you had trouble with your parents? Have you gotten a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend? Have you had a change in financial status? Did you come into money or did you have to pay out a lot of money? Did you get pregnant? Did you have an argument with a close friend? Did you get bad grades one semester? All of these things are major life changes. And research has suggested that if you have more than 250 points of stress, you are much more likely to have a stress related illness in the next 12 months. I know it does. It sucks. It definitely focused my mind on what's important in life, Cole. You know, when people you're close to die, it's really quite shocking. Okay, now here's the good news, folks. Here's the good news, folks. You're like, holy cow, how am I going to get out of my bills? How am I going to get out of school? How am I going to get out of this or that? You can't. You can't. You can't. You can't. So you might think that we're all going to get sick and die because of stress. No. If you remember, I suggested to you a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about emotions that your frontal lobes and your amygdala work together to cause your final emotions. Stress is an emotional response. So, just like you can use your frontal lobe to help control your emotions, you can use your frontal lobe to help control your level of stress. You can keep your amygdala from activating the fight or flight response depending upon the way you choose to perceive events in your life. So, stress is a habit of thinking that you learn. If you try really hard, you can hopefully learn a new habit of thinking to prevent you from experiencing stress. Let's see, who was telling me? Ashley Nicole was saying that therapy is teaching me methods, but so far they aren't very effective. Changing any habit is hard. Ask a smoker how easy it was to quit smoking. Ask a former alcoholic how hard it is to quit drinking alcohol. Habits are hard to break, Andrea Nicole. So, learning how to deal with stress in a positive manner is another habit that you have to learn, and it's hard too. All right. So, here's the deal. Think about this. Emotion is a product of arousal and cognition. So, it's the way you think about the event. This guy, Lazarus, came up with a really cool model. Now, he argued that in order for people to experience stress, they have to have two things. They have to realize that something is stressful, and more importantly, they have to decide that it's probably too difficult to handle. Okay? If you see a stressor coming up, but you feel confident that you can handle it, it's no longer a stressor. We sometimes call it a challenge, something fun to do, right? So, what Lazarus argued is that really there are two appraisals that human beings go through before they activate their autonomic nervous system. Number one, is something harmful, threatening, or challenging? Do you have a test? Do you have a kid to take care of? Do you have a test, a class to pass? Do you have a job that you have to do? Do you have to defuse a bomb today, right? That is the primary appraisal. Do I have a challenge? The secondary appraisal is more about your resources. Can I cope with this stressor? So the bomb diffuser, why doesn't the bomb diffuser get all freaked out and nervous? Because the bomb diffuser has been trained how to fix this problem. They feel confident that they can deal with that stressor. Even if you do have something that's stressful, as long as you feel like you can cope with it, you are going to experience minimum or no stress. The reason that people experience stress is because they have a feeling that this thing that is in front of them is going to overwhelm them. This is what we would call the secondary appraisal. Does that make sense, folks? Hopefully that makes sense. William Cray says all of the above. Thank you very much. Hey, it's good to see you, William. Thanks for joining class. Hope you've been here for a few minutes, but I'm glad to see that you're here now. Now, here's the deal. What determines what kind of secondary appraisal you will have? Well, you know what? Some of it's just your personality. Some people are born to be a James Bond. Some people are born to be an Urkel and all nervous. Some people learn coping strategies. And Andrea, that's what your therapist is trying to do, trying to teach you coping strategies. And then some of it is the social support. It's way easier to not be stressed out if you got friends looking out for you. I think you folks all probably know that, right? Now, let's talk a little bit about these mediating factors. Okay, personality style. Personality style. I don't know if any of you folks have ever heard of the type A personality. A type A personality is somebody who is extremely competitive, extremely impatient, and somebody who has a bad temper. Does anybody know a type A person who is impatient, competitive, and with a bad temper? Anybody know somebody? We're going to talk about some coping strategies in just a moment here. Just a moment. Okay? Does anybody know a type A person? Or are you a type A person? Now, it turns out that type A people are more likely to have heart related troubles. This was actually discovered by a doctor. I've got his book upstairs. I forget his name, Rosenbaum or something, from the 1960s. He was a heart doctor and he noticed that he had two basic types of patients. Some patients who showed up early and were very anxious about their appointment and tended to lose their cool and had sort of high emotional responses. And then some of his patients that came to his doctor's office tended to sit back and be relaxed. And they didn't worry if the appointment was running 10 or 15 minutes late. And he realized over time that it was these impatient peoples that kept having the recurrent heart trouble. Research was done, and it was discovered that people with a type A personality who experience stress more strongly are more likely to experience the negative effects of stress. Now, further research has suggested it's not so much being impatient, it's not so much being competitive, but it's those people that are really hostile and angry. You know, the crazy thing is, my best buddy that I told you died at 54 this past Christmas, he was a very angry human being. He was, yes, he was impatient. Um, he wasn't super competitive, but he was a very hostile, angry man, always angry at the world. He was a type A personality. He had a stroke. A stroke is potentially related to your level of stress. So his personality qualities may have caused him to experience this stress related sickness that killed him, right? A more free person. Right, the Myers Briggs is good. You know what, William? I'm going to give you next week. Actually, we're going to take what I believe to be the most legitimate online personality test possible. We're going to find out your personality using the Big Five next week. Good point. So that's one quality. So one of the things that you can do, my friends, is learn to cool your temper. If you have a bad temper, that is something to work on. Now, this fellow named Kobasa in the 1970s looked at business executives to see who were successful and who weren't. And he discovered a quality he called psychological hardiness. You know what? Some people are committed to what it is they're doing. Some people really believe in what they're doing day in and day out. If you believe in what you're doing, raising children, going to school, your job, if it gives you a great sense of meaning and you really are committed to that, that's a good quality. If you're the kind of person that when things come up, you see them as challenges and not problems. So is that test coming up a problem or is it a challenge or a puzzle that you can solve? And if you feel like you can control yourself in these challenges, if you have commitment, see life as a series of challenges and not problems, and have a feeling of self control, you experience what is commonly called the quality of psychological hardiness. And what this fellow Kobasa found with his study of business executives in the 1970s is that they tended to have the best income outcomes. They tended to be the ones that were most successful in their companies and in their jobs. Now, another fellow named Seligman looked at college students and he, to try and figure out what made them more or less susceptible to stress. And he discovered what he called a quality of learned optimism. Do you know what it means to be optimistic versus pessimistic? How many of you are pessimistic? Do we have any pessimists out here? Are any of you pessimists and you're always saying, oh, this is terrible. This is the worst. This is the worst. Do we have any of you out there who are optimists? Are you an optimist? I'm a very optimistic person. I think that's my one positive quality, right? Now, here's the deal. How do you explain success and failure? You know what? A optimist will see success as permanent. They will see it as something, a success is something that they have in all aspects of their life. It's pervasive. And you know what? An optimist will say, I did it. I was successful. I made this happen. On the other hand, when an optimist fails, they'll say, you know what? This is just a temporary setback. This is not permanent. You know what? This is a failure in one part of my life, not all of my life, so it's not pervasive. And you know what? There were other things that affected my outcomes, not me, because or I did what I needed to do. So an optimist is not going to see failure as permanent or pervasive, right? Uh, Now, on the other hand, if you're a pessimist, anytime something bad happens, you're going to say, "Man, this has ruined my life. This is never going to get any better." You're probably going to say, "You know what? Just like everything else in my life, it's a disaster." Right? And you're going to say, "You know what? I am the reason I failed." Right? So here's the deal. If you have these qualities, you're a pessimist. And you know what? Here's the deal. All of these personality styles will affect the way you think of and process stress. So, Eli, you're looking at some coping strategies. The first thing you can do is try not to get so dadgum angry, right? Find something and invest yourself in your life and try to be more optimistic. Now, tonight in class and Tuesday in class, we talked about this model developed by a fellow named Albert Ellis. Most people take their failures way too personally. They blow up when they fail. And he argues that this leads to stress. So, most of the time, when something happens, an activating event or adversity comes out, a person starts thinking, oh my God, this is horrible. This is terrible. This is bad. It's going to happen. This bad's going to happen. This thing bad's going to happen. And it causes you to have a set of emotional consequences. You get all stressed out. What I'm going to do tonight in class, Eli, is I'm going to have you learn how to dispute these initial beliefs. Most of the time, the bad things that happen to you are not nearly as bad as your first emotion will tell you. If you sit down before a fearful event and think about it, you will actually find that failure is not as bad as you thought it was going to be. Once you realize this, you can go into that high stress situation without the fear of failure. It changes your effect or the consequences, right? So here's the deal. I had if I have a job interview next week, my belief might be, oh my God, if I don't get this job, I'll never get another job, and this will be horrible, and my life will be ruined. That will cause me to be very, very stressed out. But if I sit down and think, you know what, this is not the only job I could get lots of jobs. I could send out applications all day long. If I don't get this job, I'll get another job opportunity. I still got the job I have. It's not my favorite one, but it's still paying me money. And if you start to dispute these beliefs, suddenly that job interview next week isn't quite as stressful because I realize that it's not the end of the world. Does this make sense to you folks? Do you understand what I'm talking about? Stress is a mindset. It's a mindset, right? So what can you do? You can learn to dispute your beliefs. Actually, and I should go back and hit that more. Eli, this is the training that your doctor's going to do. It's called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. Basically, thinking is a habit. Most of the time, when people think about the things that stress them, they have a set of beliefs that they have always had that they habitually use. What your therapist is going to do is bring you into the laboratory when you are not experiencing those stressful things, and they are going to talk about these things with you. And they are going to ask you when X happens, instead of thinking like you typically do, let's see if we can get in the habit of putting these new thoughts in our brain. Okay? Exactly. That's a great way to think about it. I remember a quote that says, not to worry because you've already overcome 100% of your stressors and challenges. And you know what? I will take you to the quote that I started class with right here. Look at this quote right here. A guy defuses bombs. Hey, are you stressed out about that? No. Either I'm right and everything's perfect, or I'm wrong and suddenly it doesn't really matter anymore. Okay? Now, that guy, instead of thinking, oh my God, this is a bomb, I could kill myself, he says, you know what? I'm not going to kill myself. Everything's going to turn out well. And if it doesn't, it won't matter anyhow. I know that's kind of crazy. That's kind of a sick and wild way to think about it. But honestly, the things that face you in your life, you will overcome them. You will overcome them because, as Gloria said, you've overcome 100% of the things that you've already faced. Eli, come to class tonight and we're going to practice that. Now, coping strategies. Here's the deal: we need to learn how to deal with the problems that we have in life. And there are really three ways that you can deal with a stressor in your life. You can engage in problem focused coping, you can focus on emotion focused coping, or you can choose not to cope at all. All right. Now, your book's going to talk about problem or emotion focused coping. I'm adding a couple of subparts as well. So, there are really several different ways, and these ways that Lazarus talked about that are not in your book. Uh, Introductory psychology books always like to simplify things down. Oh, excuse me, wrong one. There we go. Like to simplify things. So they talk about these two main problems. Um, but there are really, so I guess there are five ways that you can deal with stress. Let's think about the first two, really. The first two. Actually, right. I would say support seeking and meaning making are part of emotion focused, okay? So here's the deal. Depending on the problem, you can choose to ignore it or you can choose to deal with it head on, right? When you choose to deal with a problem head on and destroy the stressor, you are engaging in problem focused coping. When you decide to ignore it and focus on positive aspects of something else, you are engaged in emotion focused coping, which is you are managing the emotions related to the problem, right? Here's the deal. Let's say you have to go to your mother in law's or your father in law's or your cousins for Christmas, and you absolutely hate your cousin, hate your father in law, or hate your brother in law, or whoever that's going to be there. How do you deal with the stress of this event? You know what? The best way to do is just to manage your emotions for that 3 hours. You know what? I'm just going to avoid my brother in law and I'm going to think happy thoughts. I'm just going to put on a happy face. That's engaging in emotion focused coping. When you're meeting a short term stressor that is going to resolve itself, Probably the best way to deal with it is to engage in emotion focused coping, right? However, there are situations where you can't just try to change your emotions. I've had tons of students that are stressed out about their exams or their grades. You know what? That is a problem that is not going away. If you have an alcohol problem that causes you stress, that's not going away. If you have a bill problem that's causing you stress, that's not going away. These problems, in order to reduce the stress, you need to deal with the problem at hand, right? And what I find is a lot of students, instead of dealing with their failure in school, they try to manage their emotions. Instead of engaging in problem focused coping, they will engage in emotion focused coping. So here's the deal: sometimes we face our problems, sometimes we just ignore our problems. And you, my friends, need to figure out which problems you can just ignore and learn how to ignore them, or you should be very attuned to fixing the problems that need fixing. Too often, people will try to engage in emotion focused coping when they're facing a problem that won't go away. You know what? The problem gets bigger and bigger and bigger and causes more and more and more stress, right? So we want to know when we should choose one of these two strategies. Now, some people talk to their friends, and you know what? Having a good set of friends, somebody to talk to, definitely helps you deal with stressful events. You know, men aren't as good as adult men aren't as good as making same-sex friendships as are females. And so a lot of times when you get to be my age, most men are isolated from anybody except their wife. Their wife is the person they go, or partner is the person they go to seek support from. And so when older men lose their spouse, they are more likely to succumb to illness than are women, because females are more likely to have a female social circle that they can draw support from in case their spouse dies. It is a well known fact that people who have been married a long time, when the female spouse dies, the male life expectancy is not nearly as long as if it's the other way or around. Having support will definitely help you deal with the stress of life. And then, you know what? It's always important to find a reason for why you're going through and doing what you're doing. You know what? Maybe your job is seems like the most meaningless thing in the world, but you know what? It has a purpose. It's helping you feed yourself. It's helping you send somebody to school. It's helping you send yourself to school. It's not a dumb job. It's the most important thing that you're doing right now. You know what? Maybe you're doing a degree. You know what? Yes, it's school, and somebody may be making fun of you because you're not at Duke or Chapel Hill and you're at Wake Tech. But you know what? You're doing this for a reason. There has to be a reason. When challenges are meeting you, don't think of this as hopeless. Say, this challenge is making me a stronger person. So, finding meaning is really an important stress reducing um, factor. In fact, it turns out I teach a developmental psych class, so I talk about adult development. And one of the things that helps people's health and life expectancy in old age is being religious. Being religious doesn't matter which religion, Jewish, Islamic, Christian, or excuse me, Jewish, Muslim, or Christian, Hindu. It doesn't matter, but it turns out that people who have a sense of spirituality uh, tend to have better life outcomes as they get older. And I would argue it's because this spirituality helps them make meaning, which reduces their level of stress. So, actually, going to church as an older adult provides you a support group to talk to, and it gives you a sense of meaning. So, although I'm not particularly religious, I do admit in my developmental psych class that being a religious person, especially in older adulthood, really improves one's life outcomes. Absolutely, prayers help. right? Even if they aren't answered, the act of praying makes you feel better about things. Great point, Rasha. Great point. And the deal is, we all have to find something to help us cope, a positive attitude, an optimistic point of view, psychological hardiness, where you see yourself in a series of challenges that you can win, um, or having a set of friends or a set of beliefs that provide you of some sort of support against the stress. Here's what I'm trying to say in all of this. All of these things influence your mindset, which is how you process your environment. So, yes, you can owe money. You can have this stress or that stress. We all may have the same stressors, but why does Bill get sick and Fred deals well with his stress? It's because of how you process the information. I'm not trying to blame you for the stress you are having. It is not your level of stress and the negative effects that it causes on you is not your fault, but it is your problem. You know what I'm saying? So it's not your fault if you're a negativistic kind of person that doesn't deal well with stress. It's not your fault at all, but it is your body and it is your problem. So if we can learn to develop better habits, uh, they can help us sort of fight these feelings of stress. You know what? There are non coping strategies. Some students, when they start failing my class, instead of coming to me and sending me an email and saying, Chris, how can I improve my performance in this class? Probably three or four of you in class right now, I have received emails from. I've received emails in my 200 students that I'm teaching this semester. I've probably received 10 or 12 emails from students saying, hey, I'm not doing well in your class, Chris. What can I do to fix the problem? This, my friend, is somebody engaging in problem focused coping. A lot of students just quit logging into my class. They're avoiding me. They're escaping their class. And you know what? That's a non coping strategy, and it always leads to either a W or an F in my class, right? Now, some people engage in what you might call safety behaviors. They might engage in problematic behaviors that make them feel good about themselves, smoking, drinking. And other sort of avoidance behaviors. And then some people just lie to themselves. They rationalize uh, their 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 uh, their life out to themselves. They lie to themselves, and you know what? Their stress swallows them up in the end because you can lie, but that doesn't change the facts on the ground. So, what do people who are successful with stress? What do? They use a mix of strategies. Well, sometimes I'm dealing with the problem, sometimes I'm just managing the emotions that the problem caused, depending upon whether or not this problem is going away or not going away. I'm learning how to use positive mental habits to reframe the things that happen to me in my life. Instead of looking at things as being permanent failures, I look at things as being temporary setbacks. Instead of looking at things as being bigger than me, I look at things as being challenges. They're not problems, negative problems, they're positive challenges to face. I know that you folks are probably saying, Chris, this is the dumbest stuff. Where are my shortcuts that will help me deal with stress? What kind of yoga can I do that's going to magically fix the problem? I can't help you, folks. Just like losing a lot of weight, learning how to manage your stress response, or quitting cigarettes, all of these things are difficult and really take a commitment to change and a lot of work. But here's the deal, you can do it. Andrea, you said it's really difficult and the things that your therapist are giving you are not working as well as you should. You know what? Here's the thing. I'll bet you probably aren't working on them as hard outside of therapy as you are inside of therapy. Whatever your therapist tells you you need to do, you need to take that and go back into your home life and find situations where you can practice that. Even if you make up the stressor so that you can practice the stress response, Andrea and Nicole, the idea is that you need to practice that new habit. New habits don't just spring up fully developed. You have to work on that habit. So you might say, Chris, this is stupid. I can't dispute an event. On Tuesday, we talked about learning how to dispute the fear of failure. Chris, I can't do that. Yes, you can. Take something that you might fail in today and dispute that belief, the negative affect that might come from a small failure in your class. Every day, practice disputing a negative outcome or failure in your life. And what you're going to find is that over time, you will become accustomed to habitually disputing your first negative emotion. So when you are facing exactly. Well, Brian, yeah, I like what you're saying, Brian. We already have the negative voice. You've already got that internal voice. Brian, you just need to change what that sucker is telling you. Right now, if you don't deal well with stress, that negative voice is telling you you can't handle it, that this is the worst thing that ever happened, and that nothing is ever going to get better. You got to smush that voice, and you got to develop a new voice that says this is a challenge. You can do it. This failure is temporary. I can retry this thing, right? It is definitely hard to break old habits. It is super duper hard to break old habits. Um, and you know what? I didn't find out that I was a neurotic, angry person till I took a personality test at the age of 35. It's taken me 17 years, but I think I've gotten to a better place. I'm not nearly as angry. Now, I still have my temper and I still lose my cool, but not as often and not as severely. And I don't think my life is as negatively affected as it was when I was a younger man. And sometimes I'm able to come up with positive thoughts instead of the negative thoughts, right? Marriage, I think I already mentioned this. Marriage, your most important relationship. Good marriages provide a buffer against poor health. Um, Turns out, bad marriages and being divorced. So if you're in a bad marriage, it's not, you don't stay even if it's a bad marriage. That's actually going to have bad outcomes. But if you're in a good marriage, if you're in a good marriage or a good relationship, and it actually turns out not to, and this is not judgmental at all, but it turns out that cohabitation, it doesn't provide nearly the buffer as actually being married. Don't know why, but there's actually a difference between having that piece of paper. Good marriages provide a buffer against poor health. Being single, being in a bad marriage, being divorced, you know what? These people do show compromised immune systems. And if you look underneath here, a sense of spirituality, as I mentioned earlier, people who are religious report more well being. Remember, we used that term well being earlier in the week. And it doesn't matter which religion, doesn't matter. I'm not trying to tell you which religion, but you got to find a sense of spirituality. Why? Because you're going to be around a bunch of people that provide that social support. Typically, most churches, most spiritual centers are going to say, hey, you probably shouldn't take those drugs. You probably shouldn't drink that alcohol. You should probably eat in moderation. So they're going to reinforce and promote the healthy behaviors that stress usually induces. And they're going to give you that sense of meaning that is really, really important. Now, maybe you don't want to go to any typical church, any whatever like that. You might find a group of people that you can really bond with. Maybe it's yoga, maybe it's meditation. You know what? You can be a person who meditates every day. You know what? You're still going to have that social support. The people there are still going to promote those healthy behaviors, and meditation is going to give you a sense of meaning, some kind of attachment to a spiritual sense of spirituality is going to help you. All right, Eli. So I've given you a bunch of things. You can develop some new thinking habits. We can learn when to face our problems and when to just manage the emotions. And we also know that finding a partner, a gang, a crew, a marriage, if you will, or a sense of spirituality, all of these things are going to help you learn how to deal with stress. Okay, you struggle with those. Honestly, Ashley Nicole, um, that's what the first thing is, knowing that I have an angry personality. And then I had to develop the habit, and it's not natural, of when I get super pissed, of saying to myself, I'm super pissed, but I'm not going to do what I usually do, which is yell and get angry. I'm just going to deal with it. And I just learned these new habits, and it felt like a new pair of clothes at first. It didn't fit, it was weird, right? But it's just a habit. And habits don't start out as habits. It feels artificial at first, Ashley. You'll say, you know what, this is not me and this is not what I'm really feeling, but I am going to promise to respond positively this time. And you're going to say, wow, that was so weird. That's not me. I was faking it. But you're going to fake it 10 or 15 times. And lo and behold, Ashley, after a while, it's going to become more natural, more automatic, and it's going to feel more like you should be doing that. Ashley, we're going to talk more about that tonight because I'm going to focus on the ABCDE model, Albert Ellis's rational emotive behavioral therapy. And we're going to talk about controlling our emotional responses to negative events. So, Ashley, if you or anybody else can come tonight at 7 p.m., we are going to be talking about stress and fighting the fear of failure that sometimes impairs our performance. And I'm going to introduce you to my favorite baseball friend, Bill the Spaceman Lee, and I'm going to let you in on his cosmic snowball theory of dealing with stress. Okay? If you folks don't fake it till you make it, absolutely. That's cognitive behavioral training, William, in a sense. I mean, I'm being hyperbolic, and a cognitive behavioral therapist would poo poo my belief. But in a sense, you're learning a new habit that's kind of fake, and you're doing it and doing it and doing it till it becomes the new habit. Hey, you folks have a great day. I hope to see you tonight at 7 o'clock. Take care and have a stress free day.